The community of Thedford recently opened a childcare center that ended years and years of a childcare desert. I'm Alex Makovica on the Rural Radio Network. I had the chance to chat with Communities for Kids, an initiative by the Nebraska Children and Families Foundation. Our guest was Noelle Wagner. She's the Associate Vice President of Early Childhood Programs. As a mom myself, living in rural Nebraska, I know the struggles of trying to find childcare. So we had an in-depth conversation. I hope you'll find it of value. And without further ado, here's the first part of my conversation with Noelle. Noelle, before we get into the story of Thedford and the work that's being done, just share with us a little bit more about the organization you're working for and the work you guys do.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me. So I work for an initiative called Communities for Kids, and what we do is partner with communities, mostly in rural areas, to help them prioritize childcare issues. We help them expand capacity and enhance quality of childcare programs, and we work in a lot of places that are considered childcare deserts, which is like very low or little to no licensed care at all.
Paint the picture for us. What does Nebraska's childcare landscape look like as it sits right now?
So we definitely have our work cut out for us. There are still over 10,000, a childcare gap of over 10,000 kids. So that's 10,000 that do not have a place to go, that the parents are wanting some place for them to go so that they can stay in the workforce. So there's, of course, we've all heard news articles about how people have had to, especially during the pandemic, had to leave the workforce altogether because they couldn't find any care for their kids. Mm-hmm. And that continues today. And there's various issues around that, one of them being workforce. Of course, it's one of the most underpaid professions in the country.
So there was a lot of work behind the initiative in Thedford, but of course the work you guys are doing across the state. So set the context for us as to how the child care center in Thedford eventually got going.
Yes. So we got the opportunity to distribute some American Rescue Plan dollars with the Department of Health and Human Services in Nebraska. We worked with senators in the unicameral to secure funding for this. We got about $4 million for this specific project. And so we got to do a request for proposal for all over the state to try to find who could spend a lot of money really quickly to do the most good in opening up child care centers and creating more capacity, more quality capacity for kids. So Thedford was one of the towns that applied to be a part of the funding, and they are in an area that's classified, it was one of 11 at the time, classified as a child care desert. They had absolutely no licensed child care in the entire county. So, and that was one of our big pieces that we wanted to accomplish with this particular project, was to try to squash completely, eradicate at least one or two child care deserts. So they were very great project to work on. They had just over $100,000, and so that's not enough to build an entire center. So what they were looking at was renovating. And the really cool thing that happened, I mean, they had some rough starts. They couldn't quite figure out exactly what was going to work for them, but one of the people on their child care board, their Communities for Kids team, was a veteran who was involved with the American Legion out there, and was able to go back to her constituents at the Legion and ask, what about this building that no one's using during the week? They have this American Legion building that they would have their meetings on for weekends, and it wasn't really getting used a lot other than those meetings, and then they occasionally have funerals there. But other than that, it wasn't getting a lot of use, and the building was very run down and needed a lot of work, and the Legion didn't have any money to fix it up. So it was kind of a really symbiotic thing, because we got to help them use that money to both repair the building so that the Legion can continue to use it on the weekends for their meetings and for those community events. But during the week, it got to transform into this beautiful child care center that completely took out their status as a childcare desert. They squashed their gap number. So they had a gap number of like 22, which means there was at least 22 kids that didn't have anywhere to go in the county, and they opened it up for 20. They had 24 spots available, so they were able to do that, which is really, really cool. This past 4th of July, right before the center opened, a little over a month before the center opened, they had a 4th of July parade in the town, and they made, the child care team out there made floats. Kids were riding bikes with signs thanking the veterans. It was just a really, really cool project, and they continue to have memorabilia on the walls from the Legion. They had to take the weapons out of there, of course, which was a whole difficult ordeal that they worked together on. But the other stuff is back. And so they just want to make sure that the kids know exactly what this partnership means. And so the kids got to make signs and ride bikes with signs thanking the vets. And we've taken pictures with the kids and the vets. And it's just been a really, really cool project.
Oh, it doesn't get more Nebraskan than that. That's really, really cool. You you kind of shared a little bit about some of the challenges, but coming to the daycare center opening back in August, it was not, it sounds like, a fluid process. You guys had a lot of bumps in the road. So when you look at it 30,000 foot perspective, what were some of the biggest challenges for getting that up and going and running? And I'm sure those challenges probably aren't unique to the Thedford area. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of have a saying around Communities for Kids that if you've seen one community, you've seen one community. Everyone's a little different, and it depends. But Thedford's a very small town, just a little over 200 people. And there are, differing opinions, and there are some people who were telling the team, why don't you just stay home with your kids? And the Communities for Kids team out there said, there are some that do want to stay home with their kids, but it's important that there's that choice, because there are some people, women who really do want to work and need to work and contribute to their economy, and so they need to have that choice. It's important to have that. So there's always that sort of attitude to get around and sort of redirect and reframe, so that there's a kind of a deeper understanding. When Communities for Kids goes into communities to kind of explain what we do, which is the bread and butter of what we do, is just technical assistance. We don't make any decisions for the community. We're not prescriptive. All we can do is say, here are some resources. Here's what collective impact is. Here is what's worked for other communities. Here's introductions to other communities. But mostly what we do is just we hang out. We're there, and we can kind of give them some gentle nudging. But other than that, we just support them. We're their cheerleaders to kind of help things move forward. In Thedford, I know they were getting creative, that they didn't have a lot of money to work with. I think the first thing they did was they tried to look at the town bar, which was closed down and might have been a good space. But I think that there were some issues getting that off the ground, just some ownership issues. So they had to kind of pivot a few times to find the right building. And when they finally got the right situation, it ended up being kind of the most beautiful story.
Yeah. You wrote a really, really in-depth and explanatory article of the whole process as we're talking about here. And the other thing you mentioned was the lack of construction available and how limited that workforce is. I mean, it's limited across the country no matter where you are, but especially in rural Nebraska. That had to be a big challenge to jump over too.
Yes. So the main veteran that we worked with out there who got involved with the American Legion building, her husband is one of those few contractors out there. So he's very, very, very busy. He had a long list, he always does, of projects to complete in the area because, like you said, it's few and far between out there, general contracting. So they stay very busy. So her husband had to be persuaded by the child care board to take on the project. And the veteran, Juliana Hinton, she had to say, if you are able to prioritize this project, then we can work full time again. We won't have to take, a day here or there to try to fill in and bubble gum some type of childcare plan. You'll be able to actually do your job full time the way you want to. So he had some really understanding clients that they had to be kind of shuffled down the list while he worked to complete this project with other local trades. And yeah, I think they're all very, very happy that it went in the order that it did.
If you're just joining us, we're on the phone today with Noelle Wagner. She's the Associate Vice President of Early Childhood Programs with Communities for Kids, an initiative with the Nebraska Children and Families Foundation, having an in-depth discussion about childcare in rural Nebraska and trying to get something like that solved. You had touched on just how the landscape of maybe parenthood has changed in the last couple of decades. What have you seen there? How has that shift progressed here in Nebraska?
I think that there have always been women who have wanted to work, and it's increased over the decades. And the pandemic forced a lot of mainly women to work from home and do childcare at the same time. And I think the pandemic really shed light that there is already an active childcare crisis going on, and it was just worsened. So we are getting lots and lots of phone calls. There's a big waiting list at Communities for Kids because everyone is learning that childcare is such an issue. When we first started doing this about 7 years ago, when we go into communities to start to kind of have that conversation about what do you need for childcare, what's going on, mainly it was moms and childcare providers coming. But the shift that we've seen in the last several years is that now people are learning that it's more of an economic development issue than even just a parent issue. Everybody depends on somebody who depends on childcare. So we're seeing school superintendents, economic development directors, business leaders, Chamber of Commerce, all sorts of people starting to kind of hear about what Communities for Kids is, or at least hear and understand how big of a problem childcare or lack of childcare is. So I think that shift has been really interesting to see, going from just what people consider a mom issue to be a community-wide issue. And a lot of more leaders are showing up.
Yeah, you went exactly where I was thinking. If you don't have childcare in an area, you're not going to get people to move back or new people to move into the area. And especially in rural Nebraska, where places are sometimes losing population, if you don't have that there, it sounds like what you're saying is you're not going to get people there. Is that fair?
Yeah, the two biggest issues that we hear about are childcare and affordable housing. And so we're actually working on some brainstorming ideas on how to actually combine those two. But childcare is definitely the one thing that keeps rising to the top. People not just not moving back, but actively leaving when they don't have that as an option.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Noelle, so that brings us to today, where we have places like Thedford who finally get to reap some benefits of all of the hard work that has been put in. But as you mentioned, there's a lot of work left to go across the state. So for people listening who are living in those childcare deserts or know somebody struggling with that, what do they need to do to take action and try to get something going in their community?
We would love to hear from them at Communities for Kids. Communitiesforkids.org is a great place to start and kind of look around, read our reports, see what we do. Even if we have too big of a waiting list, we can always provide some type of resource, get some type of information in your hands. So go to our website, email us, look around, and we're happy to chat with you.
Noelle, what else is important to mention as you think about the conversation we've had that we have not had a chance to touch on?
We are just so incredibly proud of the work that our communities are doing. We started with 10 in 2017, and now we're in over 70 communities in Nebraska. They continue to impress us and make us look really good. We just love working with rural areas. We could not be more thrilled to wake up and do what we do every day, because we're seeing downtown revitalization in little towns. It's overwhelming, the progress that our communities have made, and we're very proud of them.
I'm sure Nebraskans everywhere are thanking you for your work. So thank you so much for taking time to join us and sharing what you're doing. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Noelle Wagner is our guest. She's the Associate Vice President of Early Childhood Programs with Communities for Kids. It's an initiative with the Nebraska Children and Families Foundation. I'm Alex Makovica reporting, and you're listening to the Rural Radio Network.